Hey all. So these are off-season war fights from the war that started on Saturday afternoon, and these first couple fights are okay, but this is going to turn into something of a teaching moment on why you should not take war fights at 3 a.m. Yeah. We actually went to a concert out of town and had to drive 3 hours. We went to the concert and then drove 3 hours back. And so some of these are kind of messy. Just my apologies. Let's treat these more as proofs of concept than as any showcase of my particular skills, let's say. So, first off, we have Nimrod here. Important not to use the light to try and close the distance if you're using your heavy after his, because that actually gives him time to recover. And so even though you're only landing the final hit of the heavy, that still gives you a long neutralize because that's how um, her heavy works. It gives you one of the longest neutralizes you can get, and still gives you that burst of power, and still applies neutralize so that you can keep the armors off and counter the global and Nimrod himself. So, important thing to watch there. Now, I should be dashing in during the special one. I was just close enough, just doing what I did right there, that I didn't worry about it that much. It's probably something that I should have prioritized, and I definitely will be working on it before I do this in season. Now, here, I forget whether that was Mystic Dispersion or a Rupture, but it does push me red thanks to his special lock. Not intentional, but this fight is so thoroughly under control that clearly it doesn't matter. And the final neutralized trigger from the special 3, as you remember, her primal sense allows her to do a burst of damage whenever she triggers a neutralize, including the one on that special 3. That's why he fell over after that. Now, this Nova fight, historically, I have generally avoided Tigra versus Nova fights because the window on his special one, lining up your heavy to counter it perfectly, is a little finicky. There's a way to do it that I think is actually 100% reliable, but I hadn't really been able to do it historically. It was just about half the time I would end up too far away and get smacked, or I'd be too late and I'd get hit by his actual charge. Both obviously very bad. It kind of clicked while I was practicing for this. I probably should have practiced a little longer, but basically, what works for me is it's like you anticipate his dash forward, hold the left side of the screen after going into the heavy animation until right before he's going to dash, and time the dash back exactly on that. And if you do that properly, then I think it is 100% reliable. But it is also pretty narrow, and I messed it up there, clearly. Like I said, I'm going to have to do a bit more to really internalize it, but this is just one to be careful of. Don't go in just because you've seen it done without practicing and making sure you know where the window is, because this, like I said, is, I think, more of an advanced Tigra fight with the exact timing on that heavy, and you just need to know that going in. Because here you'll see what happens a couple times in a row here if you are a little bit off one way or the other, and there that was just stupid. I knew that he was too close and his heavy was going to hit me. I should have backed off twice. See, there I went a little bit too early. If you mistime it, you are just too far away. He has time to dash away, to dash in. It's just not safe. So you really have to nail the window. And that is just something that I'm going to be practicing more and more so that I internalize it. It's just important to note that the timing on this particular Tigra fight is a little bit closer to like, hey, make sure you have the evade down for Korg's special 1, than it is like, hey, make sure you have the evade down for like Mr. Negative's special 2. Don't get hit by it, you noob, right? There are different difficulty levels there, and you just have to know which one you're signing up for if you take this particular fight yourself. That said, if you do it right, it's really simple, and she completely shuts him down. So glad I got that practice in because it did kind of give me that little epiphany. I just clearly have some more work to do on said epiphany before it's really locked in. So now we jump ahead to this Warlock fight. Take this with Sersi. This is not an ideal fight, but I just kind of wanted to get an idea for how she did in war, and this gives us an interesting, almost worst case scenario for her performance, because she does have the benefit of having 2 buffs, as you'll see here, which means that his infections will be shorter. But she only gets 2 buffs because I don't have an awakened Sersi. We could get up to 4 or 5 if she was awakened and I could get the power gain, and then I went for like the true damage, which I think you do see me go for here, and then maybe also had some regens. That would be enough to actually keep infection off entirely, which would be really good because even though we are heal blocked here and we can't regen at all, because we are trying to regen from having willpower on, Warlock is constantly degenning us and constantly power draining us, which means that we're not going to get to our special 2. We're not going to get the Furies. There are a lot of things about this fight that do not go well for her kit, but you'll also see that the base damage is enough. Even being heal blocked, even taking degen, even without her Furies, she is doing enough here. We are cleanly winning the HP race, and that means that she's serviceable in an otherwise vanilla fight. And while I don't think that I would ever think of this as a top option in the future, it is kind of nice to know it's here. And yes, I am taking into account the fact that the defender has recoil on. That would mean that they were closer to about half health than 35, but honestly, that's fine. We still would be winning the HP race, and again, not boosted or anything. There are also ways that you could have taken this differently. I think if I were to assign this particular path in Season, I probably would have dropped Kitty because I don't think that the Tigra synergy was really that important, and I would have brought Odin instead to supercharge Sersi. Because with Odin on the team, Warlock's infection never would have taken hold, and I would have gotten to a special 2 a while ago. And even though the special 2 itself wouldn't have been able to crit because of Warlock's abilities with his armor, after that I very quickly would have taken him out with basic combos, and this fight probably would have lasted about 45 seconds. And that's something that we do a fair amount, is send Odin over to this lane, because it also makes whoever gets his pre-fights that solid for this second fight with the rich get richer node. And this is more the one that I intended to test with Sersi, because we know that CGR is going to get that armor up right away. The reason that I went with parry heavy is that in case the armor up triggered the unstoppable from the global, I wanted to have the glancing up immediately, so that if he hit into me for a full combo, he couldn't have possibly crit, he couldn't have triggered his power gain if he had finished with a light, and he would be doing half damage. So that way I knew I was going to survive. And then after that, I go for my Furies and I just try and keep it up. And so I have this fight perfectly under control until right there. I was winning the rich got richer race because I always had more buffs up than he did. I was winning the HP race, and then I, again, don't take fights early in the morning. I mistimed the special 1 punish, allowed him to dex, that took him to 5 judgments. He fate sailed me, power locked me, and started degenning me, all of which just made that difficult to recover. I probably could have recovered it, but I did not. And so that is on me. As you can see right away, Tigra's Neutralize is going to stop future armor ups, but the reason that she is not as good a candidate for this as Sersi was is because she doesn't stop the first one. And so I did have a 30% chance to get hit in the face there. And if he had gone for full combo and gotten the power gain, we might have had a bad time. So I do think Sersi was by far the better option there, and I think she did very well until I messed it up. But that's very avoidable. I didn't even have to punish that special one. I just could have waited and let him come in and parried him, right? Would have been super simple. So I do think that fight, I consider that one a successful test. So now we do Tigra versus Dragon Man. I actually particularly like this matchup. I think it's a very good one for her because, as you can see now, his power charge came back and the neutralize prevented the power gain, and he's done. He's never getting that power gain back. And so now we are just fighting a fairly vanilla Mystic with easy counterable specials who is going to be running Mystic Dispersion. That's potentially annoying, but it's not nearly as scary as Dragon Man normally is. So we bait this out. Don't try and make it miss or anything, because that last hit is not a projectile. And then we just step back, throw the heavy, counter it, get the ruptures up. We're doing plenty of damage here. We're benefiting from polka dot power because ruptures are damaging debuffs. This fight is going extremely well. Step back into the next special one to make sure we hold on to our senses. He throws this, and this is where I make the mistake. I was so in control, I did not need to go for the heavy. I had enough ruptures. I just should have gone in for the combo. It would have finished him off fine. Didn't need to take that risk. It does make sense at the beginning of the fight, especially because the spacing will usually be more consistent. It did not make sense there. So that is 100% on me. Don't do that. And then that fight's easy. Alright, and now we get to the Sersi fight that I was super tempted to edit out and pretend I didn't take. Because what you're going to see here is that she beautifully counters Iron Man Infinity War because she takes less damage when you're blocking him to bait out heavies. Every time he gains an armor up, she gains a bonus transmutation buff, which allows her to just ramp really quickly and makes her healing and furies better. However, she cannot block unblockable specials. So again, 3 a.m. I have no idea what I was thinking there. I think it's probably more accurate to say I simply was not thinking. And I tried to block his special. It took out like 50% of my health. I ate brute force damage I didn't need to. I got hit with the shock. Just completely and utterly stupid. But now I have my 9 Furies, still have a quarter of my health left. Now I can just play this like Iron Man Infinity War. As long as I'm careful, I might be able to finish this. Also, if Sersi was duped, I want to point out I would have triggered power gain a couple times now. And I probably would have gotten my glancing buff. But there we run into, I make a mistake. I shouldn't have tried to go for the glancing buff again. I got parried by Stand Your Ground because this is the Limber node. And I could have even recovered from that if I hadn't gone in and tried to punish. I just was not thinking at this point. That fight was winnable. I just should have baited out heavies, countered them with my own heavies. It all would have been fine. I dare say that was even a good matchup for Sersi, because if she had been at full health and boosted, and had not eaten a special one to the face early on because I forgot that it was unblockable, then she probably would have finished that cleanly at like 75-80% health left. Even better if she was duped. So I do think she has a place in war. You just need to be competent. And so then I decided to go ahead and take this boss with her. I was originally actually planning to take this with Tigra. I do think that's a better matchup. You have a lot more red numbers, and that means that you probably turn off his regen basically anytime you do it. But at this point, I was like, you know what? I'm not sure I have the wherewithal for a good Tigra fight. It is 3 a.m. I am playing like absolute horse turds. And I think we should just go with the straight-ahead bruiser and see how Sersi's damage is here. Like, this isn't necessarily going to be ideal for her, because she's definitely going to give him enough gamma to trigger his regen. She doesn't really have any special abilities to counter Hulk, and she also does less damage in general when she cannot parry. I don't think she's the best stun immune fighter, not unless there's some other reason to use her, like against that Iron Man with all of his armor ups. And then, as you can see, when we refresh the Furies with the special one, we're also not getting the stun there, which often gives her a great opportunity to safely re-up her glancing buff. So, not the best fight, but we're also definitely winning. She's taking very little damage from a pretty beefy defender on the boss node with True Strike. So he would be getting through armor and resistances, but the glancing still reduces his damage and actually allows her to block pretty well. She's doing plenty of damage to him. We're definitely relying on crits here. You can see how much smaller the non-crits are thanks to the adaptive node. But I think that this is a good showcase of just the amount of damage she can do even in non-ideal situations. So go ahead, back up there, go for the refresh. The last thing I want is to lose our Furies. And then I'm trying to get him to throw this special one. Okay, he did throw it. I forgot if he ended up doing that. It's definitely a slowish fight. There are better options. Like I said, Tigra would have been better. Killmonger would have been better. Nick Fury would have been better. Hercules would have been better. Like, this just isn't a hard boss placement, right? But it is a tanky one, and it is one that can do a fair amount of block damage, and so I feel like it was a pretty decent test of her just from a damage perspective. And I'm feeling good about this, honestly. Because if we were facing somebody where her utility really was coming into play, then this would look slow, but you would also have a reason to use her because she would be controlling the fight. So I'm not just going to assign her to a vanilla boss fight like this, but I am glad that this one was here for me to test, because then that's just going to be like one less thing I worry about when I do end up assigning her. Shouldn't have done that. Should have waited until after the regen kicked in. I don't think the Furies would have expired, and really it would not have mattered if they did. And then I should have thrown it. Now, again, to mention how much I think her dupe would help, the extra power gain probably would have allowed me at some point to throw a special one from up close, get true damage up, and then I would be ignoring all of the resistances from the adaptive buff, or from the adaptive node that gives him all of those buffs, and I would have been doing way, way, way more damage. I don't think it was worth going for here unduped, because the possibility of us losing our Furies if he was even a little bit stingy was not worth the risk. But with her awakened ability, I think that that particular rotation would be a lot more realistic. So I'm glad that this map lined up. I am sorry that I played these champions poorly, but hopefully you can see what I was going for in terms of testing things, and I do consider this one a success from the for science standpoint of things. I have another off-season war coming out tomorrow. Look out for that. I've already taken the first few fights of it. I think it's a fun one. I get to use Venompool again, prove why he's so good in certain spots. I dust off Mr. Negative. I think that's probably the best verb for what I do with him. And then I also get to use Claire again and show off just how great she is against the Global this season. So look forward to that one. Until then, thanks so much for watching, and take care.